The thundering hooves echoed through the canyon as Delilah Morgan clutched the reins of her exhausted mare, glancing fearfully over her shoulder at the dust cloud marking her pursuer's path. Freedom had cost her everything her family's scorn, her meager possessions, and now possibly her life if those men caught her before she reached Silver Creek. The year was 1878, and the Arizona Territory had little sympathy for a woman traveling alone. Delilah had fled an arranged marriage to a man 3 times her age, a wealthy banker from Philadelphia who had promised her father connections and financial security in exchange for a young bride. At 22, she had other plans for her life than becoming the trophy wife of Bartholomew Higgins. Her horse stumbled, nearly sending her tumbling to the hard-packed earth. The poor creature was reaching its limit after 2 days of hard riding with minimal rest. Delilah stroked the mare's sweaty neck, her own throat parched from the relentless desert heat. "Just a little further, Penny," she whispered, though she had no idea how much further Silver Creek truly was. The small mining town was her only hope. Her cousin Amelia had written that a woman could make an honest living there, teaching children or working in the general store. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape when Delilah spotted the telltale signs of civilization, a thin wisp of smoke against the sky. Hope surged through her veins, giving her renewed strength. But that hope was short-lived as Penny stumbled again, this time collapsing to her knees with a pained whinny. "No, no, please," Delilah begged, sliding off the mare's back and attempting to urge the animal up. But Penny's eyes rolled back, her breathing labored. The mare had given everything she had. Delilah sank to the ground beside her faithful companion, tears streaking clean lines down her dust-covered face. The distant sound of horses grew louder. Her father's men would be upon her soon. The crack of a rifle shot split the air, and Delilah instinctively flattened herself against the ground. Another shot followed, then the sound of men shouting and horses wheeling around. Confused, she raised her head slightly to see her pursuers retreating, a lone figure on horseback approaching from the direction of Silver Creek. As the rider drew closer, Delilah could make out a tall man with broad shoulders, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who belonged in this harsh landscape. "Madam," he called out, his voice deep and cautious as he slowed his horse. "Those men troubling you?" Delilah stood shakily, clutching her small travel bag to her chest. "They work for my father. I'm trying to reach Silver Creek." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He approached slowly, as if afraid of startling her. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Your horse is done for," he said matter-of-factly, kneeling to examine Penny. "I'm sorry." A sob escaped Delilah's throat. She was all I had left. The man stood, removing his hat to reveal thick dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "Name's Quinn Hayes. Most folks call me Quinn." He glanced over his shoulder in the direction her pursuers had fled. "They'll be back with more men once they regroup. Silver Creek's 5 miles north. My ranch is closer." Delilah hesitated, weighing her options. Trust this stranger or wait for her father's men to return. As if reading her thoughts, Quinn spoke again, his tone softer. "I know you've got no reason to trust me, madam, but I promise you'll be safe. I can get you to town tomorrow after you've had rest." "Delilah," she said finally. "Delilah Morgan." Quinn nodded once, then turned to his horse, retrieving a pistol from his saddle holster. He handed it to her, grip first. "So you don't have to just take my word." The weight of the weapon felt foreign in her hand, but the gesture wasn't lost on her. This man was giving her the means to protect herself from him, if necessary. Quinn moved to Penny, stroking the mare's neck gently before drawing his own pistol. "You might want to look away, Miss Morgan." Delilah turned her back, flinching at the sound of the merciful shot that ended her faithful companion's suffering. When she turned back, Quinn was already securing her bag to his saddle. "We should move," he said, offering his hand to help her mount his horse. Delilah placed her foot in the stirrup, allowing Quinn to boost her up onto the saddle. He swung up behind her, his chest warm against her back as he reached around for the reins. The proximity to a strange man would normally have scandalized her, but nothing about her current situation was normal. "Hayes Ranch is just beyond that ridge," Quinn said, pointing to a distant mesa as they rode. "It's not much, but it's peaceful." The setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and crimson as they approached a modest ranch house nestled against the foothills. A small barn and corral stood nearby, with a few cattle grazing in the distance. It wasn't the grand estate her father owned back east, but something about the humble homestead called to Delilah. "You live here alone?" she asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them during the ride. "Just me and Rusty," Quinn replied. As if on cue, a large red-coated dog bounded from the porch, barking excitedly at their approach. Quinn helped Delilah dismount, her legs wobbly after the long journey. Rusty circled them, sniffing curiously at the newcomer. "He doesn't bite," Quinn assured her, leading his horse toward the barn. "Make yourself at home. I'll see to Scout here and be right in." Delilah stood uncertainly on the porch, watching as Quinn led his horse away. She still held his pistol, though she'd tucked it into the pocket of her travel coat. The door to the ranch house was unlocked, a testament to the isolation and relative safety Quinn must feel here. The interior was simple but neat. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A narrow hallway presumably led to bedrooms. Everything was utilitarian but comfortable, with a few touches handmade quilts, a bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes that spoke of a home rather than merely a place to sleep. Delilah was examining a framed photograph on the mantel, a younger Quinn standing beside an older couple, presumably his parents, when the door opened behind her. She turned to find Quinn removing his hat and coat. "Not what you're used to, I expect," he said, noticing her surveying the room. "It's lovely," she replied honestly. "Peaceful." Quinn moved to the stove, stoking the banked fire and adding wood. "You must be hungry. I don't have much fancy, but there's venison stew I can heat up." As he busied himself with preparations, Delilah sank into a chair at the small table, suddenly aware of how exhausted she truly was. The events of the past days caught up with her all at once: the desperate flight from her father's house, the days of hard riding, the fear of capture. "Why are you helping me?" she asked abruptly. Quinn paused in his work, considering her question. "Out here, folks help each other. It's how we survive." He resumed preparing the meal. "Besides, any woman running that hard from something has good reason, I figure." "My father arranged a marriage," Delilah explained, finding herself wanting this stranger to understand. "To a man older than my father, with a reputation for cruelty to his previous wives." "Previous wives?" Quinn raised an eyebrow. "Two deceased, one in an asylum." Delilah's voice was bitter. "Father said I was being dramatic when I refused." Quinn placed a steaming bowl before her, along with a chunk of crusty bread. "Sounds like you made the right choice, running." They ate in companionable silence, Delilah too hungry to maintain conversation. When she finished, Quinn cleared the dishes and put a kettle on the stove. "I've only got the one bedroom," he said finally, a hint of awkwardness in his voice. "You'll take it, of course. I'll bunk out here by the fire." Delilah felt her cheeks flush. In her desperation, she hadn't considered the sleeping arrangements. The realization of her situation hit her fully. She was alone with a strange man, miles from civilization. According to the standards of society, her reputation was already ruined. If her father found her, he would claim she was compromised and force the marriage to Higgins regardless. "I don't want to impose," she began. "It's no imposition," Quinn interrupted. "It's just for tonight. Tomorrow I'll take you to Silver Creek, help you find your cousin." The kettle whistled, and Quinn busied himself preparing tea. When he handed her a steaming cup, his smile was gentle, without expectation or demand. "Thank you," Delilah said, accepting the cup, surprised by the gesture. Most men she knew didn't concern themselves with such niceties, especially not rugged frontiersmen. "My mother always said tea soothes the troubled spirit," Quinn replied with a slight shrug, as if embarrassed by the sentiment. "Thought you could use some soothing after your ordeal." It was such a simple kindness, yet it brought tears to Delilah's eyes. She had expected to pay for his help in some way. Men always wanted something in return. Yet here was this cowboy, offering her shelter, food, and now tea with a smile that asked for nothing. Quinn showed her to the bedroom, a Spartan space with a neatly made bed, a small dresser, and a washstand with a pitcher and basin. "There's clean water in the pitcher, towels in the dresser. If you need anything, just call out." "The pistol," Delilah remembered, reaching into her pocket. "I should return it to you." Quinn shook his head. "Keep it close tonight. It'll help you sleep better." He paused at the door. "Good night, Miss Morgan." "Delilah," she corrected him softly. "Please call me Delilah." A small smile touched his lips. "Good night, Delilah." Left alone, Delilah poured water into the basin and washed away the dust of her journey as best she could. She changed into her nightgown, the only clean garment she had left, and slipped between the sheets of Quinn's bed. They smelled of sunshine and the faint herbal scent she had noticed on him. Sage, perhaps. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. The events of the day replayed in her mind, along with worries about tomorrow. Would her father's men find her in Silver Creek? What would she do for money once she reached town? And why couldn't she stop thinking about the gentle cowboy sleeping just beyond her door? Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the smell of coffee and bacon. Delilah dressed quickly in her travel-worn clothes, wishing she had something fresher to wear. She found Quinn at the stove, his back to her as he tended to breakfast. "Good morning," she said, announcing her presence. Quinn turned, a smile warming his features. "Morning. Sleep well." "Better than I expected," she admitted, moving to help set the table without being asked. They fell into an easy rhythm as they prepared and ate breakfast, as if they'd shared many such mornings. Quinn told her about Silver Creek, the people, the general store run by the widow Carson, the small schoolhouse that occasionally needed a teacher. "If your cousin isn't there," he said, refilling her coffee cup, "Mrs. Carson might take you on. She's been looking for help since her arthritis got bad." "You're very kind," Delilah said, meeting his eyes across the table. "I don't know how to repay you." "No repayment necessary," Quinn replied, his gaze steady. "But there is something you should know before we ride into town." Delilah tensed, waiting. "The men who were chasing you, I recognized one of them. Jack Dawson. He's done work for the mining company, and he's not known for giving up easily." Quinn's expression grew serious. "If your father hired him, you'll need to be careful in Silver Creek. It's the first place they'll look." Fear clutched at Delilah's heart. "What should I do?" Quinn seemed to wrestle with something before speaking. "I have a proposition, but I want you to understand you're free to refuse." She waited, suddenly apprehensive. "The townspeople know me. I keep to myself mostly, but I'm respected well enough. If we were to say you're my wife, Newly arrived from back east, no one would question it. It would give you protection, at least until we figure out something more permanent. Delilah blinked, processing his suggestion. You want me to pretend to be your wife? Just for appearance's sake, Quinn clarified quickly. You'd stay here, have your own room, of course. I'd sleep in the barn if it made you more comfortable. But Dawson and his men wouldn't dare trouble a married woman, especially not on Hayes land. It was logical, Delilah had to admit. A single woman alone was vulnerable, but a married woman had protection under the law and social custom. Why would you do this for me? She asked, searching his face for ulterior motives. Quinn's expression softened. Because no one should be forced to marry against their will. Because you deserve a chance at the life you want. He hesitated, then added more quietly. And because this place has been mighty lonely since my parents passed. There was such honest longing in his voice that Delilah found herself believing him. This wasn't a scheme to take advantage, it was one solitary soul recognizing another. If I agree, she said carefully, how would we explain the sudden appearance of a wife no one knew about? We'd say we married back east before I returned here. You stayed to settle family matters and have only now joined me. Quinn leaned forward, warming to his plan. It's not uncommon out here. Many men establish homesteads before sending for wives or family. Delilah considered the proposal. It wasn't ideal, but it offered safety and time, two things she desperately needed. How long would this arrangement last? Until you feel safe to move on, or... Quinn trailed off, leaving unspoken possibilities hanging between them. Very well, Delilah decided, extending her hand across the table. It seems I'm to be Mrs. Hayes, at least for now. Quinn's large hand enveloped hers, calloused but gentle. Thank you for trusting me, Delilah. They rode into Silver Creek later that morning, Delilah seated behind Quinn on Scout. The small mining town consisted of one main street with various businesses: a general store, saloon, blacksmith, small hotel, and assorted other establishments necessary for frontier life. People nodded greetings as they passed, curious glances directed at Delilah. Quinn tipped his hat in response but didn't stop until they reached the general store. A bell jangled as they entered, announcing their presence to the gray-haired woman behind the counter. Quinn Hayes, she exclaimed, peering over her spectacles. Twice in 1 month? The world must be ending. Quinn chuckled, removing his hat. Mrs. Carson, I'd like you to meet my wife, Delilah. The older woman's eyebrows shot up. Wife? When did this happen? We married before I returned last fall, Quinn explained smoothly. Delilah stayed back east to settle family matters. She's only just arrived. Mrs. Carson came around the counter, examining Delilah with frank curiosity. Well, you're certainly a sight prettier than this old cowboy deserves. Welcome to Silver Creek, Mrs. Hayes. Thank you, Delilah replied, falling into her role. It's wonderful to finally be here with my husband. The word felt strange on her tongue, but not unpleasant. Quinn's steady presence beside her was reassuring as Mrs. Carson peppered them with questions about their courtship and Delilah's journey west. They had prepared answers on the ride to town, and the story flowed naturally between them. We need to outfit my wife properly, Quinn said eventually, gesturing to Delilah's travel-worn attire. She had to leave most of her things behind. Mrs. Carson clucked sympathetically. Of course, dear. Let's get you sorted. The next hour was spent selecting practical clothing for ranch life: sturdy skirts, blouses, a few dresses for town visits, undergarments, and a proper pair of boots. Quinn insisted on quality items despite Delilah's whispered concerns about cost. My wife deserves the best, he said loud enough for Mrs. Carson to hear, but his eyes conveyed a different message to Delilah. Don't worry, I can afford it. Their next stop was the bank, where Quinn withdrew money and then surprised Delilah by opening an account in her name. "Every wife should have her own funds," he explained when they stepped outside, handing her a small pouch of coins, "for necessities or whatever you might need." Delilah was touched by his thoughtfulness. It was a freedom few married women enjoyed, control over their own money. "Thank you, Quinn. That's very progressive of you." A smile tugged at his lips. "Don't tell anyone. Might ruin my reputation as a simple cowboy." They were about to mount Scout for the return journey when a commotion at the far end of the street caught their attention. 3 riders were approaching, dust billowing behind them. Delilah's blood ran cold as she recognized Jack Dawson among them. Quinn noticed her reaction immediately. "Get on, Scout," he said quietly, helping her into the saddle. "Ride back to the ranch if anything happens." "I'm not leaving you," Delilah protested. Before Quinn could argue, the riders had reached them. Dawson's eyes narrowed as he recognized Delilah. Well, he drawled, dismounting. "Miss Morgan, your father's mighty worried about you." Quinn positioned himself between Delilah and the men. "The name's Hayes now, Mrs. Hayes, and she won't be going anywhere with you, Dawson." Confusion flickered across Dawson's face. "Hayes? You saying she's your wife?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." Quinn's voice was calm but carried an underlying steel. "We married back east last year." Dawson looked between them, skepticism evident. "That right? Because her daddy seems to think she's engaged to some banker fella from Philadelphia." "My father arranged that engagement without my consent," Delilah spoke up, finding courage in Quinn's steady presence. "I was already married to Quinn." One of Dawson's companions leaned forward in his saddle. "Prove it." Quinn's hand moved subtly toward his holster. "I don't have to prove anything to you boys. But if you want to take this further, we can step over to the sheriff's office. I'm sure he'd be interested to hear about men harassing a married woman." The mention of the sheriff caused the men to exchange glances. Frontier justice could be unpredictable, and threatening a local rancher's wife would not be viewed favorably. "Mr. Morgan's paying good money to bring his daughter home," Dawson said, making one last attempt. "Then I suggest you earn it elsewhere," Quinn replied evenly. "My wife stays with me." The tension stretched between them until Dawson finally shrugged. "Your funeral, Hayes. That banker fella ain't gonna be happy." "Not my concern," Quinn replied. Dawson mounted his horse, fixing Delilah with a hard stare. "This ain't over, lady. Money like that don't just disappear." The 3 men rode off, leaving Quinn and Delilah in the dusty street. Only when they were out of sight did Quinn's shoulders relax slightly. "We should get back to the ranch," he said, mounting behind her. They might return with more men. The ride back was tense, both of them scanning the landscape for signs of pursuit. When the ranch house came into view, Delilah felt a surprising sense of relief, as if she were truly coming home. Quinn helped her down from Scout, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "You handled yourself well in town." "I was terrified," Delilah admitted. "Couldn't tell." There was admiration in his voice. "You're stronger than you know, Delilah Hayes." The use of his surname with hers sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Do you think they believed us?" "Dawson didn't," Quinn said honestly, leading Scout toward the barn. "But he'll hesitate now, which buys us time." Over the next few days, Delilah settled into life at the Hayes Ranch. Quinn showed her the daily routines, feeding the chickens, tending the small vegetable garden, preparing meals. He never demanded she take on these tasks, but seemed pleased when she chose to help. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in vibrant colors. Sometimes they talked, Quinn telling stories of growing up on the frontier, Delilah sharing her dreams of one day becoming a writer. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts yet aware of the other's presence. 1 week after her arrival, Quinn announced he needed to check on a section of fencing on the north side of his property. "Will you be all right alone for the day?" he asked over breakfast. "Of course," Delilah assured him, surprising herself with how confident she felt. Just days ago, the thought of being alone in this wilderness would have terrified her. Quinn hesitated at the door, looking back at her. "Keep the rifle handy, just in case. I'll be back before sundown." After he left, Delilah busied herself with chores, finding satisfaction in the physical work. She had just finished hanging laundry on the line behind the house when the sound of approaching horses made her freeze. Grabbing the rifle from inside the door, she moved cautiously to the front porch. 3 riders approached, not Dawson and his men, but strangers. 2 men and a woman, all dressed in the practical attire of ranchers. "Hello, the house," called the woman, a sturdy-looking person with gray-streaked dark hair. "Is Quinn around?" Delilah lowered the rifle slightly but kept it visible. "He's checking fence lines. I'm Delilah Hayes, his wife." The woman's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but a broad smile quickly followed. "Well, isn't that something? I'm Martha Wilson. This is my husband James and our son Thomas. We're neighbors about 5 miles west." Relief washed over Delilah as the Wilsons dismounted. Martha approached with a friendly demeanor that immediately put her at ease. "Quinn never mentioned he'd gotten himself a wife," Martha said, eyeing Delilah with open curiosity. "It was rather sudden," Delilah replied, falling back on their practice story. "We married back east before he returned here." Martha nodded, though a knowing look in her eyes suggested she might not fully believe the tale. "Well, we've brought some preserves and a side of bacon. Neighborly visit. Mind if we water our horses?" "Of course not," Delilah said, gesturing toward the well. "Please come inside when you're done. I'll put on some coffee." As she prepared refreshments, Delilah could hear the Wilsons speaking in low voices outside. No doubt they were discussing Quinn's mysterious new wife. She straightened her shoulders, determined to play her role convincingly. By the time the Wilsons entered the house, coffee was brewing and Delilah had set out the few cookies she'd baked the previous day. Martha immediately made herself at home, helping to arrange cups while her husband and son sat somewhat awkwardly at the table. "So," Martha began once they were all seated, "how did you and Quinn meet?" Delilah shared the story they had crafted a chance meeting at her cousin's home. A whirlwind courtship, a simple ceremony before Quinn had to return west. Martha listened intently, occasionally exchanging glances with her husband. "Quinn's a good man," James Wilson finally spoke. "Keeps to himself mostly, but always ready to help a neighbor." "That's true," Delilah agreed, thinking of how Quinn had come to her rescue without hesitation. "I'm very fortunate." Martha's expression softened. "It's nice to see that place with a woman's touch again. Not since Quinn's mother passed has it felt like a proper home." Thomas, who appeared to be in his early 20s, spoke up for the first time. "Pa says Quinn's the best horseman in the territory. Says he could have made a fortune breaking horses if he wasn't so set on ranching." The conversation flowed more easily after that, with the Wilsons sharing stories about Quinn that painted a picture of a respected, if somewhat solitary, member of the community. Delilah found herself wondering why such a good man lived alone in this remote place. As if reading her thoughts, Martha said, "Quinn wasn't always so isolated, you know. Before the war, he was engaged to Sarah Thornton. Lovely girl from up near Flagstaff." James cleared his throat. "Martha, that's not our business to share." "His wife should know," Martha insisted. "Anyway, Quinn joined up with the Union Army in '62. When he came back in '65, Sarah had married a shopkeeper from California. Quinn never spoke of it, but he wasn't the same after." kept to himself, built this place up with his parents until they passed. Delilah absorbed this information, her heart aching for the young man who had lost both his love and, eventually, his family. It explained so much about Quinn, his solitary nature, his quiet strength, his willingness to help a stranger without expectation of reward. The Wilsons stayed for nearly 2 hours, clearly curious about the new Mrs. Hayes but too polite to ask overly intrusive questions. When they finally prepared to leave, Martha pulled Delilah aside. "Whatever the true story is between you and Quinn," she said quietly, "I'm glad he's not alone anymore. This country isn't meant for solitary souls." Before Delilah could respond, the sound of a horse approaching drew their attention. Quinn rode into the yard, surprise evident on his face at finding visitors. "Wilson," he called, dismounting. "What brings you out this way?" "Just being neighborly," James replied, shaking Quinn's hand. "Getting acquainted with your wife." Something flickered in Quinn's eyes, concern, perhaps, but his expression remained calm. "Hope she's been hospitable." "Very much so," Martha assured him with a warm smile at Delilah. "You've chosen well, Quinn Hayes." After the Wilsons departed, Quinn helped Delilah carry the coffee cups back inside. "What did they say?" he asked, an edge of worry in his voice. "Nothing concerning," Delilah reassured him. "They were just curious. Mrs. Wilson did mention your engagement before the war." "I'm sorry about what happened." Quinn's shoulders tensed briefly before he sighed. "It was a long time ago." "Still," Delilah said gently, "losing someone you love leaves marks." Quinn met her gaze, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. "Yes, it does." He cleared his throat. "Did you convince them about us being married?" "I think so," Delilah replied, though Martha's parting words suggested the woman had her suspicions. "They seemed to accept it." Quinn nodded, appearing relieved. "Good. Word will spread. It should help keep Dawson at bay a while longer." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Delilah found herself studying Quinn's profile, noticing details she had missed before: the small scar near his right eyebrow, the way the corners of his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness of his hands despite their strength. "Tell me about the war," she said suddenly. Quinn was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if the memories were physically far away. "I was with the 1st California Cavalry, despite being from Arizona Territory. We mostly fought in New Mexico and Arizona. Wasn't like the big battles back east, but we saw our share." He paused, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. "Lost good men. Did things I'm not proud of. Came back different, like we all did." Delilah waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. "Sarah wrote faithfully for the first year," he continued. "Then the letters came less often. By the time I returned, she'd been married 6 months. Can't blame her, she was young, and 3 years is a long time to wait with no guarantee I'd return." "I'm sorry," Delilah said softly. Quinn turned to her, a sad smile touching his lips. "Don't be. It worked out as it should. She has children now, a good life in San Francisco. And I have this." He gestured to the land spread before them, bathed in the purple light of dusk. "It's enough." But Delilah wondered if it truly was enough, this solitary existence with only memories for company. She had come to appreciate the peaceful beauty of the ranch, but she also recognized the emptiness that seemed to echo in its quiet moments. As days turned into weeks, Delilah found herself thinking less and less about moving on to Silver Creek or finding her cousin. The ranch became familiar, comfortable, a place where she felt useful and, surprisingly, at peace. Quinn proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to ride properly, how to care for the animals, even how to shoot with reasonable accuracy. For his part, Quinn seemed to grow more relaxed in her presence. His smiles came more frequently, and occasionally she would catch him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster. 1 month after her arrival, they rode into town together for supplies. Delilah was now known to the townspeople as Mrs. Hayes, and their greetings were warm and familiar. There had been no further sign of Dawson or his men, though Quinn remained vigilant. As they loaded their purchases onto Scout, Sheriff Davis approached them, his expression serious. "Hayes," he said, nodding to Quinn before tipping his hat to Delilah. "Madam, mind if I have a word?" Quinn tensed visibly. "Something wrong, Sheriff?" "Got a telegram yesterday from Philadelphia," Davis said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "Seems there's a banker named Higgins looking for his fiancée. Description matches Mrs. Hayes here." Delilah's stomach dropped. Quinn moved slightly, positioning himself protectively beside her. "My wife has never been engaged to any banker," he said firmly. The sheriff's eyes moved between them, assessing. "That's so? Because this telegram offers a substantial reward for information leading to the return of one Delilah Morgan, daughter of Theodore Morgan of Philadelphia." "I don't know any Delilah Morgan," Quinn replied evenly. "This is my wife, Delilah Hayes." Sheriff Davis studied them for a long moment before refolding the telegram and tucking it away. "Well, I reckon I know the folks in my jurisdiction better than some Eastern banker. Just thought you should know about it." "Appreciate the warning," Quinn said, visibly relaxing. The sheriff nodded, then added in a lower voice, "Might be good if Mrs. Hayes was seen more regularly around town. Establishes her place here, if you take my meaning." "We'll keep that in mind," Quinn agreed. As they rode home, Delilah couldn't shake the sense of dread that had settled over her. "They won't give up, will they?" Quinn's arm tightened slightly around her waist as he guided Scout. "Your father has money and influence, but we have time and distance on our side. And it seems the sheriff isn't inclined to cooperate with them." "For now," Delilah said, unable to keep the worry from her voice. "But if the reward is large enough, then we'll deal with that when it comes." Quinn's voice was steady, reassuring. "I won't let them take you, Delilah. Not unless it's what you want." "It isn't," she said with certainty. The thought of returning east, of facing her father's wrath and Higgins's cold ownership, filled her with dread. But even more than that, she realized, the thought of leaving Quinn and the life they had begun to build together was unbearable. That night, a fierce storm blew in from the mountains. Thunder shook the small ranch house, and lightning illuminated the bedroom where Delilah lay awake, listening to the rain lash against the windows. A particularly loud crack of thunder made her flinch, and she found herself wishing for Quinn's reassuring presence. As if summoned by her thoughts, a soft knock sounded on her door. "Delilah, are you all right?" Quinn's voice was barely audible over the storm. She sat up, pulling the quilt around her shoulders. "Yes, I'm fine. Just startled by the thunder." The door remained closed, but she could sense him still standing there. "Quinn, I just wanted to be sure," he said. "Storms can be frightening out here. Would you?" Delilah hesitated, then gathered her courage. "Would you sit with me a while? Just until the storm passes." There was a moment of silence before the door opened slowly. Quinn stood in the hallway, illuminated briefly by a flash of lightning. He was dressed in his trousers and an undershirt, his hair tousled from sleep or restlessness. "I don't want to intrude," he said, remaining in the doorway. "You're not intruding," Delilah assured him, moving to make space on the edge of the bed. "I'd welcome the company." Quinn entered hesitantly, sitting at a respectful distance on the bed's edge. Another crack of thunder rattled the windows, and Delilah instinctively reached for his hand. He allowed her to take it, his large fingers curling gently around hers. "The worst will pass soon," he said, his voice soft in the darkness. "These summer storms blow themselves out quickly." They sat in silence for a time, listening to the rain and thunder. Delilah was acutely aware of Quinn's presence, the warmth of his hand, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the faint scent of soap and leather that seemed to cling to him. "Quinn," she said finally, "what happens when Dawson returns? Or when my father sends someone else?" He turned to face her, his features barely visible in the dim light. "What do you want to happen, Delilah?" "I want to stay," she admitted, the words freeing something within her. "Here with you. But I don't want to bring danger to your door." Quinn's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "My door, my choice. And I choose to stand with you, however long you need. But this arrangement, our pretend marriage, it can't last forever," Delilah said, voicing the thought that had been troubling her. "Eventually, people will expect things. A real marriage." Quinn was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and careful. "What we have doesn't need to be defined by what others expect. It can be whatever we choose to make it." "And what would you choose?" Delilah asked, her heart pounding. The question hung between them, charged with possibilities. Outside, the storm began to recede, the thunder more distant now. "I would choose your happiness," Quinn finally answered, "whatever form that takes." It wasn't quite the answer Delilah had hoped for, but the sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "You're a good man, Quinn Hayes." He smiled faintly in the darkness. "I try to be." Rising from the bed, he added, "The storm's passing. You should try to sleep." Delilah nodded, reluctantly releasing his hand. "Good night, Quinn." "Good night, Delilah." He paused at the door, looking back at her. "Sweet dreams." After he left, Delilah lay awake for a long time, replaying their conversation in her mind. Quinn was honorable to a fault, unwilling to take advantage of their unusual situation. It was one of the things she admired most about him, and one of the things that frustrated her as her feelings for him deepened. Morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Delilah found Quinn already at work in the barn, repairing a section of roof damaged by the wind. She brought him coffee, watching as he skillfully hammered boards into place. "Sleep well?" he asked, pausing to accept the cup. "Eventually," she replied. "Thank you for sitting with me." Quinn nodded, his eyes meeting hers briefly before returning to his work. "Storm did some damage, but nothing we can't fix." The casual use of "we" didn't escape Delilah's notice. Over the past weeks, the ranch had gradually become theirs rather than his in their conversations, a subtle shift that reflected her integration into his life. "Mrs. Wilson invited us for dinner on Sunday," Delilah mentioned, leaning against a support beam. "I told her we'd come if the weather permits." "That's fine," Quinn agreed, hammering a nail with perhaps more force than necessary. "The Wilsons are good people." Something in his tone made Delilah study him more closely. "You don't sound enthusiastic." Quinn set down his hammer, wiping his brow with his sleeve. "Martha Wilson means well, but she's a matchmaker at heart. Before you arrived, she was constantly trying to introduce me to her nieces or the daughters of friends." Delilah laughed, picturing Quinn's discomfort. "Well, now you have a wife to shield you from her efforts." "That I do," Quinn agreed, a smile softening his features. "Though it puts you in her sights instead. She'll be full of advice about married life." "I'll manage," Delilah assured him, surprised to find herself looking forward to the social outing. It had been so long since she'd enjoyed the simple pleasure of a dinner with friends. Sunday arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp, clear, and golden. Delilah wore one of her new dresses, a deep blue that complemented her eyes, and arranged her hair more carefully than usual. When she emerged from her room, Quinn was waiting by the door, freshly shaven and wearing his best shirt. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Delilah felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself." The ride to the Wilson Ranch was pleasant, the landscape painted in autumn colors. Quinn seemed more relaxed than usual, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the area. His arm around her waist felt natural now, a comfort rather than a necessity for riding double. The Wilsons' home was larger than Quinn's ranch house, with a sprawling porch and several outbuildings. As they approached, Delilah noted other horses already tied at the hitching post. "Looks like we're not the only guests," she observed. Quinn nodded, a hint of resignation in his voice. Martha never can resist gathering a crowd. Inside, they found not only the Wilson family but also the town doctor and his wife, the blacksmith and his daughter, and several other neighbors Delilah had met briefly in town. Martha Wilson greeted them effusively, drawing Delilah into the kitchen while the men congregated in the main room. "I'm so glad you could come," Martha said, handing Delilah an apron. "Quinn has avoided my Sunday dinners for years. You're clearly a good influence." Delilah smiled, accepting the task of slicing bread. "He speaks highly of your family." "I think he was just unaccustomed to socializing after being alone for so long." Martha's expression softened. That man was withering away in solitude, though he'd never admit it. Having you there has put the light back in his eyes. Before Delilah could respond to this observation, Martha's daughter-in-law called her away to check on a pie, leaving Delilah to ponder her words. Had Quinn truly been so lonely? And had her presence really made such a difference? Dinner was a lively affair, with multiple conversations flowing around the long table. Quinn sat beside Delilah, occasionally touching her hand or shoulder in a natural display of affection that made their marriage seem authentic. Whether he was consciously playing the role of devoted husband or simply acting on instinct, Delilah couldn't tell, but she found herself responding in kind. After the meal, the group moved to the porch to enjoy the cool evening air. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon music filled the gathering dusk. James Wilson cleared a space in the yard, and couples began to dance. Quinn stood slightly apart, watching the festivities with a small smile. Delilah moved to his side, following his gaze to where Thomas Wilson was awkwardly leading the blacksmith's daughter in a dance. "Young love," Quinn commented. "Clumsy but earnest." "Do you dance, Mr. Hayes?" Delilah asked, a teasing note in her voice. Quinn turned to her, eyebrow raised. "Occasionally, Mrs. Hayes, when properly motivated." "And what would constitute proper motivation?" she challenged, emboldened by the festive atmosphere. In answer, Quinn offered his hand. When she placed hers in it, he led her to the makeshift dance floor. His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer than propriety strictly allowed, but entirely appropriate for a husband and wife. "I may step on your toes," he warned as they began to move to the music. "It's been some time since I danced." But Quinn moved with the same natural grace he showed on horseback, guiding her through the simple steps with confidence. Delilah followed his lead, aware of the solid strength of his arm around her, the warmth of his hand holding hers, the way his eyes never left her face. "You dance beautifully for a man out of practice," she said softly. "I have excellent motivation," he replied, his voice equally low. The music shifted to a slower tune, and other couples drew closer together. Quinn hesitated for a moment before adjusting his hold, bringing Delilah against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, as they swayed together. "People are watching," she whispered, though she made no move to create distance between them. "Let them," Quinn murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "We're married, after all." The pretense seemed to fade away in that moment, replaced by something that felt startlingly real. Delilah rested her head against Quinn's shoulder, allowing herself to imagine that this was their life, not a temporary arrangement born of necessity, but a true marriage built on growing affection and respect. As the evening progressed, Delilah noticed Martha Wilson observing them with obvious approval. The older woman caught her eye and gave a small, satisfied nod, as if confirming her earlier assessment that Quinn had indeed found happiness. The ride home was quiet, both of them lost in thought as Scout carried them through the moonlit landscape. When they reached the ranch, Quinn helped Delilah dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said as they walked toward the house. "I know these gatherings can be overwhelming." "I enjoyed it," Delilah assured him. "It's nice to feel part of a community again." Quinn paused at the porch steps, turning to face her. "You've made an impression on them. They like you." "And what about you, Quinn?" The question escaped before she could reconsider. "Do you like having me here?" In the silvery moonlight, his expression was open, vulnerable in a way she had rarely seen. "Having you here has made this place feel like home again. I'd forgotten what that was like." The honesty in his voice touched something deep within Delilah. Without thinking, she stepped closer and placed her hand against his cheek. Quinn remained perfectly still, his eyes never leaving hers. "Delilah," he said softly, a question and a warning in his voice. "Quinn," she replied, rising on her toes to bring her face closer to his. "I'm not playing a role anymore." For one breathless moment, they stood on the precipice of something new. Then Quinn closed the distance between them, his lips meeting hers in a gentle kiss that held both restraint and promise. When they parted, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the first week you were here," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" Delilah asked, her hands resting lightly on his chest. "Because I needed you to be sure," he replied. "To know your own mind without feeling obligated by our arrangement." "I am sure," she said firmly. "Whatever brought me here, fate, chance, necessity, I'm grateful for it. And for you." Quinn's smile in the moonlight was the most beautiful thing Delilah had ever seen. He took her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gentle kiss before leading her inside. That night, they talked for hours in the main room, the lamp burning low as they shared hopes and fears that had previously gone unspoken. Quinn spoke of his dreams for the ranch, his desire to expand the herd and perhaps one day build a larger house. Delilah confessed her longing to write stories of the West, to capture the beauty and hardship of frontier life for readers back east. "You should do it," Quinn encouraged her. "You have a way with words, and these stories deserve telling, the real ones, not the exaggerated tales in those dime novels." "Perhaps I will," Delilah mused, warmed by his support, "though I have much to learn still about ranch life." "You're a quick study," Quinn said, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "Much better with the chickens than I ever was." As the night deepened, their conversation turned to the future, their future, together. The pretense of their marriage had become a foundation for something genuine, something they both wanted to build upon. "I should court you properly," Quinn said as the first hints of dawn appeared at the window. "Take you on buggy rides, bring you flowers, ask your permission to call." Delilah laughed softly. "We've rather skipped ahead, haven't we? Married before courting." "Then let me court my wife," Quinn suggested, taking her hands in his. "Let me win your heart properly. Not just because I was the first person who showed you kindness after your escape." The tenderness in his proposal brought tears to Delilah's eyes. "You've already won my heart, Quinn Hayes, but I would love to be courted by my husband." In the weeks that followed, Quinn was true to his word. He brought her wildflowers gathered from the hills, took her on picnics by the stream that ran through the eastern edge of his property, and spent evenings reading aloud from his favorite books while she worked on her first attempts at writing stories. Their kisses became more frequent, more natural, though Quinn maintained a respectful distance otherwise. He continued to sleep in the main room, giving Delilah the bedroom, a gesture of patience that both frustrated and endeared him to her. 2 months after Delilah's arrival at the ranch, they rode into town for the harvest festival. The main street was decorated with autumn bounty pumpkins, corn husks, and colorful leaves adorning storefronts. Tables laden with food lined one side of the street, while games and contests occupied the other. As they wandered among the festivities, Delilah was struck by how easily she had been accepted into this community. Women greeted her warmly, sharing recipes and asking her opinion on various domestic matters. Men tipped their hats respectfully, some stopping to discuss cattle prices or weather predictions with Quinn. "Mrs. Hayes," Sheriff Davis called, approaching them with a friendly nod. "Glad you could make it. We've got a pie contest starting soon if you're interested in entering." "Oh, I'm afraid my pies aren't quite up to competition standards yet," Delilah demurred. "But I'd be happy to help judge," the sheriff chuckled. "A diplomatic answer. Speaking of which," his voice lowered slightly, "thought you should know I got another telegram from back east. Seems your father is offering an even larger reward now." Quinn's hand tightened on Delilah's. "Has anyone shown interest?" "Not from Silver Creek," Davis assured them. "Folks here protect their own. But I can't speak for drifters or strangers passing through." "We appreciate the warning," Quinn said, nodding gravely. As the sheriff moved on, Delilah couldn't shake a sense of unease. "It won't end, will it? My father will keep searching." Quinn guided her to a quieter spot near the church. "There might be a way to resolve this permanently." "How?" Delilah asked, hope and wariness mingling in her voice. "If we were legally married," Quinn said carefully, "your father would have no claim on you. A husband's rights supersede a father's in the eyes of the law." Delilah blinked, processing his words. "Are you proposing, Quinn Hayes?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Not very romantically, it seems." He took her hands in his. "I should do this properly." To Delilah's surprise and the delight of several onlookers who had noticed their conversation, Quinn knelt before her in the dusty street. "Delilah Morgan," he said, his voice clear and steady. "These past months have shown me what my life was missing. You've brought light and laughter back to my home and to my heart. I know our beginning was unusual, but I want our future to be certain. Will you marry me, truly marry me, and make what began as pretense into a lifetime of reality?" Tears blurred Delilah's vision as she looked down at this man who had rescued her in more ways than one. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Quinn, I will marry you." A cheer went up from the gathering crowd as Quinn rose and swept Delilah into an embrace, sealing their engagement with a kiss that left no doubt about the depth of his feelings. Martha Wilson was the first to reach them, clasping their hands in hers. "I knew it. I told James there was real love growing between you two, pretend marriage or no." Delilah gasped. "You knew?" The older woman snorted. "Of course I knew. Quinn's too honest to be a good liar. But I also knew you needed protection, and Silver Creek takes care of its own." One by one, townspeople approached to offer congratulations, many admitting they had suspected the truth of the situation but had chosen to support the charade out of respect for Quinn and concern for Delilah's welfare. "The pastor can perform the ceremony today if you wish," Mrs. Carson suggested. "Make it official before word spreads any further about that reward." Quinn looked to Delilah, leaving the decision to her. "What do you think? It's not the wedding you might have dreamed of." "My dreams have changed," Delilah replied, squeezing his hand. "Being your wife, truly your wife, is all I want now. And so, as the autumn sun began its descent, Delilah Morgan became Delilah Hayes in truth as well as name. The ceremony took place in the small church, hastily decorated with harvest flowers by the women of the town. Delilah wore a borrowed dress of pale blue silk, while Quinn donned his Sunday best, freshly pressed by Mrs. Carson herself. The entire town attended, filling the church to capacity. Martha Wilson stood as Delilah's matron of honor, while James Wilson served as Quinn's best man. The pastor, a kindly older gentleman who had known Quinn since childhood, performed the ceremony with genuine warmth and evident pleasure. When Quinn placed a simple gold band on Delilah's finger purchased discreetly from the town jeweler during the hasty wedding preparations, his hands trembled slightly. "With this ring, I thee wed," he said, his voice husky with emotion. The kiss they shared as husband and wife was met with enthusiastic applause. Outside the church, the townspeople had transformed the harvest festival into a wedding celebration, with the largest table now reserved for the newlyweds. As evening fell, lanterns were lit and music began. Quinn led Delilah in their first dance as a legally married couple, holding her close as they moved to the gentle melody. "Are you happy, Mrs. Hayes?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Delilah replied, her heart full to bursting. "And you? I have everything I could want right here in my arms," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The celebration continued well into the night, but eventually the newlyweds bid farewell to their friends and began the journey home. The ranch house was dark when they arrived, Rusty greeting them with sleepy enthusiasm before returning to his place by the hearth. Quinn lifted Delilah into his arms to carry her across the threshold, a traditional gesture that made her laugh with delight. Inside, he set her gently on her feet but kept his arms around her. "Welcome home, Delilah Hayes," he said, his voice low and tender. "It's been home for some time now," she replied, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "Because you're here." In the soft lamplight, Quinn's eyes held a question. Delilah answered it by rising on her toes to kiss him, pouring all her love and newfound certainty into the gesture. When they separated, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I should put on some tea," he said softly. Delilah blinked in surprise. "Tea? Now?" A gentle smile curved Quinn's lips. "My mother always said tea soothes the spirit, and I want nothing but peace and joy for you tonight, and all our nights to come." The memory of that first evening when she had expected demands from this stranger who had taken her in, only to receive kindness instead brought tears to Delilah's eyes. "You gave me tea and a smile when I had nothing to offer in return. You offered me a chance to be the man I wanted to be," Quinn replied, brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "A man worthy of someone like you." As the kettle heated on the stove, they moved about the kitchen in comfortable harmony, Quinn retrieving cups while Delilah found the honey he liked in his tea. It was a simple domestic scene, but to Delilah it represented everything she had gained: safety, partnership, love. With steaming cups in hand, they settled on the porch swing to enjoy the crisp night air and star-filled sky. Quinn's arm around her shoulders felt right, natural, as if they had shared countless evenings just like this one. "I've been thinking," Quinn said after a comfortable silence, "about expanding the house in the spring, adding a proper parlor, maybe another bedroom or two." "For guests?" Delilah asked innocently, though her heart quickened at the implication. Quinn's fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Guests, or perhaps, in time, children." The thought of building a family with Quinn filled Delilah with a warm glow. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Very much." They finished their tea as the moon rose higher, casting silver light across the land that was now truly theirs together. When Quinn took her empty cup and set it aside, his expression had changed, still gentle, but with an undercurrent of desire that made Delilah's breath catch. It's getting late, he said, helping her to her feet. And it's been a long day. The best day, Delilah corrected, allowing him to lead her inside. At the doorway to what had been her bedroom alone, Quinn paused. I can still sleep in the main room if you need more time. Delilah's answer was to take his hand and draw him into the room with her. I've had all the time I need to know my own heart, Quinn Hayes. Their first night as husband and wife was everything Delilah could have hoped for: tender, passionate, a perfect expression of the love that had grown between them through months of shared work, conversation, and gradual trust. Later, as she lay in the circle of Quinn's arms, listening to his steady breathing, Delilah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. What had begun as a desperate flight from one fate had led her to a future brighter than any she could have imagined. What are you thinking about? Quinn murmured, his voice drowsy. How strange life's paths can be, Delilah replied, nestling closer to him. If I hadn't run away, if you hadn't been riding by at that exact moment. Fate, Quinn suggested, pressing a kiss to her hair. Or divine intervention. Either way, I'm grateful. As am I, Delilah agreed, closing her eyes. For tea, and smiles, and everything that followed. Over the following years, the Hayes Ranch prospered under their joint care. Quinn expanded the cattle operation, while Delilah began selling stories to Eastern publications, tales of frontier life that painted a true picture of the challenges and rewards of the West. True to his word, Quinn added to the house each spring, first a proper parlor where Delilah could write at a desk by the window, then a nursery that welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Hope, followed 2 years later by a son they called Daniel. Delilah's father eventually ceased his search, though they learned through correspondence with Amelia that he had disowned his daughter entirely. The news brought a momentary sadness, but no regret. Delilah had found a family of her own making, one built on love rather than obligation. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the expanded porch watching their children play with Rusty's puppies in the yard, Quinn presented Delilah with a small wooden box. What's this? She asked, opening it to find a beautiful silver pen nestled on velvet. For your stories, Quinn explained. I thought it fitting for a successful author. Delilah ran her fingers over the engraving. Today, you are my favorite story. It's perfect, she said, leaning over to kiss him. Thank you. Quinn's arms settled around her shoulders, a gesture as familiar now as breathing. Do you ever regret it? Coming west, marrying a simple rancher. Delilah looked out at their home, the thriving ranch, the children's laughter, the life they had built together, and shook her head. Never. Not for a single moment. Nor I, Quinn agreed, his voice soft with contentment. Who would have thought that a desperate chase and a dying horse could lead to such happiness? Delilah smiled, remembering her fear that first day and the unexpected kindness that had followed. You gave me tea when I expected demands, she said, echoing words she had spoken on their wedding night. And in doing so, you gave me everything. As the sun set over their land, painting the horizon in brilliant gold and crimson, Quinn Hayes held his wife close and thanked whatever forces had brought them together. A chance meeting, a pretend marriage, a true love. Their story wasn't the one either of them had imagined for themselves, but it was better, richer, more real than any fantasy could have been. And it had all begun with a cup of tea and a smile.